Hello everyone, welcome to the Learning Project. I am Harsha. We are in conversation today with Tanvi Shroff, who did her chemical engineering from UT City in Mumbai, then went on to do her master's in biomolecular and chemical engineering from Johns Hopkins in the United States. She's currently pursuing her PhD from Germany. So we are going to speak to her not just about her career path, but also about the Marie Curie Fellowship Program, various scholarship programs between Germany and India, also her work experience, and a lot of other things. So, Tanvi, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you for taking out time for us. I know you are on a break here, and welcome to the Learning Project.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to be a part of today's program.
Lovely, lovely. So, Tanvi, let us start with your journey after you did your chemical engineering. What got you interested into biology after pursuing your chemical engineering?
Yeah, so actually to answer that, I'll go back to school even when I was in the 8th standard or so. We had to write like a small research article about, genetic modification and any kind of gene therapy. So it was a very, very new topic at the time for me. I didn't know anything about it. So kind of just reading about it, I was becoming really interested in this kind of a field. So I knew that even if, I'm not going down a medical path, if I go through an engineering path, I'm going to be able to create some kind of clinically relevant products. And I think that was always an interest and goal of mine, which was to build or manufacture things that can help patients. So it could be either pharmaceutical, like from a pharmaceutical side or from a medical device side. So I knew that I somehow need to have biology in my toolbox.
Right.
And it did not work out that way in 11th and 12th because when you take an engineering path, you have to drop biology.
Right.
In the standard 11th and 12th vocational topics for engineering. So when I went to to engineering school, we had some courses which were related to biomaterials, and we also have a department of biotechnology in UDCT itself, which is now called ICT, by the way, the Institute of Chemical Technology.
Right.
So through exposure, through little projects here and there, I was able to develop that basic introductory biology knowledge to kind of keep that gap going. And I became more and more interested in that topic.
Right, and so you did a course with MIT to get into the group things like
Yeah,
that.
so on the side, in addition to all the workload that I had with the undergrad, I also took an introductory biology class. So it was self-paced, pretty much doing the coursework with that class online. It was really helpful. So this was through edX, and Coursera is another option for people if they're curious.
Right. That's great. So now tell us something about your master's. What made you choose Johns Hopkins? Did you look at other options, and what exactly did you do your master's thesis in?
Yeah, so my interest was always in biomedical kind of fields or molecular biology topics related to chemical engineering. So I picked universities just like that. So I picked also UC San Diego. I was accepted there. I was accepted to Columbia University. But what I liked specifically about Johns Hopkins was that there would be a chance to interact with the medical school. There would be a chance to interact with surgeons and actual clinical people on the medical campus. So that was very attractive for me with this program. And also it was an opportunity to work in a lab to do research there. So that's how I ended up picking Johns Hopkins. And to just put it in perspective, like every lab there has usually a PI, which is the principal investigator, who could be a professor or some kind of senior researcher. And that lab has usually a main research focus and a core expertise. So I was in the group of Dr. David Gressias, and what they were doing was focused on building these miniature gripper devices to replace surgical tools. So usually if a big surgical tool is supposed to cut open a patient and you pull out their cancer, which might be in a patient, that's called a biopsy, that little piece of tissue, which can then be studied. What this group was doing instead was to make these very microscopic, like really on the scale of half a millimeter, that was the biggest one. There were much smaller than this. These kind of devices the idea was that they are swallowed and they change their shape from 2D, they become 3D. So they are folding. And so the idea is when they reach the tissue, they would fold onto the tissue and grab it. And they had magnetic properties. So they could be manipulated with a magnet. You could pull them back out and then study the tissue. So this way there would be the goal was that there would be no need to cut open the patient anymore. So it's a kind of a non-invasive surgical device. And what I was interested in was to use that maybe as a drug delivery device also. So suppose instead of metal, which these grippers were made of, they could be made of plastic, like not so much plastic, but more like hydrogels, where they could grip and they could be loaded with a drug or medication, go to the site and then release it in a controlled fashion. So the way all of this was made was with a skill set called microfabrication. So microfabrication is a very similar skill set used to also make, for example, computer chips or SIM cards. So what that actually is to create very minute structured patterns, one on top of the other. So it's like a bottom-up fabrication technique. And it's been used in the semiconductor industry for like years. So it's a very well-perfected technology or well-researched technology. And we were applying that towards biomedical applications. So this was something that was very interesting for me. And the core experience that I got there was to work in a clean room. So clean room is a room where the air is filtered multiple times so that you have a very minimal dust count. Because when you're making these small devices, even a small piece of dust can be very big and it can ruin the whole fabrication. So you have to wear also like a full body suit. Just basically the eyes are covered with goggles, and then you have big gloves, and you go into this clean room. And working there is also like a specialized skill set, something to be learned. So that was basically my skill set, which I gained in this lab.
Amazing. So after finishing your master's, you mentioned that you went on to gain some work experience, right? You worked with a startup in the US. So tell us something about that.
Yeah, so actually this experience of microfabrication set me up really well to then apply for my next job, because I was still interested in companies that are using now I'm interested in companies that are using microfabrication for a biomedical application. And that turned out to be Emulate in Boston. So they were developing a device called an organ on a chip. And that is essentially a mini model of an organ outside the body as a replacement for animal testing. So I'll give you a background. Usually, like, we might have illnesses, we might be taking medications, but do we actually know how that illness happened? Like when someone has a heart attack and then the heart is healing itself. Like, do we actually know how that happens? Or the progression of cancer in a certain organ? Do we know why? Like, what is the mechanism for that? Also, for example, when we take these drugs, we take ibuprofen, we take all these medications, they were actually possibly tested on animals before they were put into the human clinical trials. So, animal models have provided a lot of useful information for the pharmaceutical industry, a lot of useful data in the past. But at the end of the day, it's an animal. So when we compare the immune system of an animal to a human, when we compare even the cell types of animals to humans, there are many differences just from the species. So what organ on chip field is doing is basically creating a functional unit of an organ outside the body to study either a mechanism of disease progression or to study how the drug interacts with that organ.
So basically what you're saying is that chip will have all the features which surround that organ within the human body. And you can exactly measure what the things that will happen in the human body can be visualized on this chip.
Yes. So you would be asking a very specific question for that organ chip. So every organ chip has a certain function. So, for example, you might want to study specifically, which eventually became interesting for me, was how does non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, so one specific disease, how is that progressing in the liver? Or you might want to understand when there's an asthmatic patient, how are the respiratory cells, how are those cells different from a normal patient? So because there are these small cilia growths on top of the cells which are pushing the mucus, and with a normal patient they are all moving kind of like this in one direction, but with the asthmatic patient they move like this. So the mucus is not cleared from that patient, and that leads to congestion. So understanding this, quantifying it, studying these specific functions of the cells outside the body is the focus of organship field. And Emulate was a startup which spun out of Harvard University, and then they had their own independent offices, and they were kind of branching out, like expanding the R&D team, and that's where I was hired. So I was hired as part of a team of 6 engineers, and our job was to basically go and talk to biologists, and a biologist would say, okay, I'm interested, I have 10 years of experience just studying asthma in cells. So I want to understand how this is happening in with a device, with this organ chip, and then use it to test drugs which could maybe alleviate that situation. And of course, one thing that I didn't mention yet is that the organ chip is not a static. So it's not like just the cells and you just put the media of the cells, like the food of the cells on top of it. There's a perfusion. So actually, you're really mimicking like a blood-like perfusion on the other side of those cells to mimic how the blood flows through our body and interacts with those cells as well. So when you're thinking about engineering like this kind of an environment for the cells, you need to consider all these different points. Like even, for example, a heart cell, that will contract. Those cells, they actually are beating. So you need to provide that environment that they can beat freely. So all those things need to be considered as an organ chip engineer. Wow. And that was basically my job.
So this is all cutting edge technology that we're talking about. Yes. So that leads me to my next question, which is regarding your PhD that you're pursuing currently. So tell us something about that.
Yeah, so after 3 years of working at Emulate, I got a lot of experience there. I got kind of deeper into this field and realized that I actually enjoy it a lot. And then I was looking into PhDs because I thought that, yeah, this is the field that I want to continue researching for 3+ years in for a PhD. And that's when the opportunity came around for pursuing, like for applying to the Marie Curie Fellowship, which took me to Germany. So it took me to Europe to pursue a PhD in this topic.
Oh, lovely. So can we talk about Marie Curie Fellowship first a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So so it's called, it's funded by the European Commission. And they basically had set aside an allowance for like a large amount of money to sponsor the PhDs of 15 of us. So 15 different PhD students just within my consortium. So this consortium is an innovative training network. So it's called an ITN. And the ITN functions in a way that there were 15 partner organizations. Each of them had one PhD student, all doing organ-on-chip stuff. And each of us had our own organ, so to say. So there was someone working on macular degeneration, like for the eyes, like for the loss of vision with age. Someone was studying cardiac arrhythmias, so different beating frequencies of the heart. And what I was studying was how to actually take 2 organ chips and connect them, and to connect them in a flexible manner, taking the example of the interaction between fat and liver, so white adipose tissue and liver tissue. And this training network, the funding was for 3 years. It was, we had to meet every 6 months. I was meeting with these 15 different PhD students who were spread all over Europe. So they are also some of my closest friends now, because every 6 months we were meeting up in some new country and exchanging like what we've done, what kind of brainstorming with each other. And also during the course of these 3 years, we got to visit each other and do internships with each other. So it was really like a training for all of us, where we had different workshops, we had different meetings, and a lot of interaction. So it taught me to collaborate really effectively and also work with other scientists in addition to my work.
Wow, so these all must be from different nationalities, right? So that's also an added
Completely
experience.
different.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so that's
exactly. Like
amazing.
I was the only Indian in mine, for example.
Right, right. So while we are on the topic, also let's talk about various other scholarship programs that are available, which are there between India and Germany. If you can
Yeah.
give us some information about that.
Yeah, so I know of a couple off the top of my head. Like, of course, there's Marie Curie. There are other this was one particular ITN, but there are many ITNs which people can also look into. So Marie Curie is definitely one of them. There is something called RISE, RISE. This is, I'm not sure if it's between like whether India is also part of it, but it's definitely between USA and India. So if someone is doing an undergrad in the US, for example, they could apply to the RISE program and then go to Germany through that. There is the like DAAD, which is another like very commonly known German scholarship program. So DAAD WISE program, Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. So there are a couple of, I think if you just do Google search, I'm sure, and I can maybe provide you a link. So there are a lot of possibilities for even like not just at an undergrad, maybe an undergrad is difficult, but like at a master's and PhD level, it's definitely possible.
Right. So, would you recommend a master's or higher education in Europe? What is your take on that? Like, would you recommend that as an option?
Yeah, I think as I also got asked this question when I went there for my PhD, they're like, "Oh, why didn't you come for your master's as well?" And I think for me at the time it was already first time living away from home. I decided to not add a language complication. But what I realized that they do for the undergrad, suppose people want to go for undergrad and masters to Europe, at least to Germany. They actually ask the student to come 6 months before the start of the semester and do a very intensive German lesson. And through this, the students become almost fluent in German, and then they can handle anything after that. So this is something which is a really good initiative, because it is that the language is important. It is important to learn the language to assimilate. And the way I did it was I moved first to Germany and then I learned the language, but I made it a point to do that because it just opens different kind of opportunities, different kind of doors when you know the language, which is the kind of main operating language. Even though work was in English, the main language, which is spoken by friends and just in colloquially, that is German.
But you would say that this additional effort is worth for pursuing your higher education in Europe. So what would be the edge that we are talking about? Vis-a-vis doing it
so first of all, I think, sorry, go ahead.
Like doing it in a place where, English is the primary language. So let's say US or some other place. So what would be that? Yeah.
So I would say that, so first of all, I mean, they look at us as native speakers because the grasp on English coming from India, like studying in India, is pretty high already. But when you're there, like a lot of the administrative stuff, like the everyday work, like a lot of that is in German, for example. So even like if you have a visa, then you have to go to the foreign registration office. This kind of stuff is all in German. And also like now as I'm interviewing for jobs, the interviews could be in German. So these are things which one should be aware of going into the program, going into any kind of program there. But with the coursework, it depends on the university, it depends on the department. Sometimes the courses could also be in German. So that's something that you need to be aware of. And usually when these courses are in German, then they ask you to come. a few months in advance to
Right.
do like an intensive German lesson.
German course.
So yeah,
No,
and
so
I
my
think like
question was that, sorry, Tanvi, but my question was
yeah,
that, it is still worth putting in that extra effort, because the
yeah,
some students would feel that, I might as well go to US or some such place where, I don't have to put in this additional effort of learning
yeah,
another
yeah,
language or what. So my question was why should one one
yeah,
look at this European courses? Like, what is the
yeah,
advantage?
yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I think in terms of the level of science and in terms
Hmm.
of the that kind of cutting edge,
Huh.
it's very interesting work here as well. So
Right.
the thing with the US is, of course, already you might have discussed H1B topics, you might have discussed the
Hmm.
lottery system and all of this.
Correct.
While there is the good side of doing your schooling there, finding a job and actually like having that stable working life later is a little bit it's a hit or miss, so to say.
Correct.
And in Europe there's definitely a shortage of skilled labor, so they really want people to come and study and to work in the workforce. But that means, of course, that it is also a good idea to incorporate into the language, because
Of
I
course.
mean, when you're in the everyday life here, just like in Mumbai, like you need to know Marathi, you need to
Yeah.
use that to get around. It's similar to that, like
Right.
you just can function better with the local language. Of course, traveling is really nice. So as a student, I think I like took all the chances to use all the student discounts and go everywhere.
Right.
So that's also a very nice, like in 2 hours, I was in France or
Of
Switzerland or
course.
some other
Of
country. So
course.
this was really interesting to just travel around
Yeah.
and
Exploring
because
Europe. Yeah, it's
public
so
transport is
beautiful. Yeah.
very connected. Yeah.
Correct.
And I think learning a language, it doesn't hurt, it's actually good for the brain to like exercise that part of the brain. So I think through that also, I met a lot of friends in the language schools. I learned about different cultures. There were Brazilians, there were Portuguese people, there were even Americans or British people. So it was really interesting to meet these people and form some good friendships through this.
So that's lovely. So you've seen the American system. Of course, you studied in the Indian system. Now you've seen the European. So what tips would you like to give to students as to know how to assimilate yourself, and what are the things that you have to watch out for? So just tell us something about that.
Yeah, so I would say, depending on the big difference that I could see throughout my career is, at least for an Indian, when you look at their LinkedIn, you can kind of back calculate what is their age, because we never take a break. We just
Hmm.
go straight from the bachelor's to the to the master's, to the PhD, to whatever.
Hmm.
Whereas in Germany or in Europe in general, a big difference is that people might take a gap year. They might
Hmm.
take a little bit longer in a certain semester or something like that. So they kind of focus on taking their time and
Hmm.
just really getting, like, being happy with with one level of progress, and then move to the next step, and then
Hmm.
move to the next step.
Hmm.
Also, the master's programs, they are very well-rounded, because in Germany, they make you do like a couple of internships and a
Hmm.
research project, so like a thesis of some sort. They make you do that. So that is like a requirement to finish. So that's a very nice requirement, because it already gives that person, like, it forces that person to get work experience, to get
Hmm.
that extra research experience. So the student is not left wondering what'll it be like if I did research, or what would it have been like to work in an industry. Like, that's something that they can just get
Hmm.
through the program itself, because the program demands it.
Hmm.
So these kind of things, I think, are they're quite an edge.
Hmm.
Whereas in the US system, that's the big market. So that is where a lot of the innovation, a lot of the big money is.
Hmm.
So that is where crazy ideas are possible.
Hmm.
So it depends really on
Your own
what
personality and
we
the
are
kind of
talking.
thing that
Yeah,
interests you. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. It depends on what the person is more open to doing.
Inclined towards, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, right, right. Oh, that's amazing.
But
Also
I
during
think
your,
yeah,
sorry,
one
go
point I
ahead,
will
go ahead.
add is like someone told me this recently, like you can't compare two planets. They really are, because a lot of people ask me which one is better. And I think that's a very wrong question because it really depends on the person's, like on the student's, not just aptitude, but interest. It depends on like what do they want from their life as well.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Also, during our conversation, I remember you told me about Association of Women in Science. So let's talk about something like these networking bodies that help one to connect with others in the same field.
Yeah. So in Boston, when I was working at the startup, I also I was also involved with AWIS, which is the Association of Women in Science. Because I think women in science in general need a bit of boost and support. Because at every career step, like if you look at women going from bachelor to master or master to PhD or like master to the workforce, at every step, women are leaving science. This is just statistically proven that the number of women is like, it seems to be like reducing in some way. So it's important that it could be that there's maybe like a bad experience here and there, or there's just a lack of information or a lack of guidance. So what this association was mainly focused on doing was to bring women together. So women in the workforce or women doing PhDs, whatever it is, to bring them together in a way, in a very constructive, like mentoring way. So they had the kind of classic program that that AWIS had was a mentorship program. So they were connecting women in industry with women, like with students.
Can you say that again? Sorry, we missed the name of the program. I couldn't hear
so it's a mentorship program.
Mentorship program. Okay.
Correct. So connecting like women who've made it in a way to the women who want to get there. And it was like every month you would, if you sign up to be a mentee or a mentor, every month you're supposed to meet and like discuss in a very constructive way, like what that mentee wants to do. Like they are also matched in this way. So the mentors and mentees are asked about their expectations, and then they are matched to have the best possible experience in a way, like in the career development path, like based on what the mentee wants to learn or do. So it could be that the mentee wants to get a promotion, then the mentor is matched in a way that they are guiding them specifically for that. Or the mentee wants to get their first job, then they are being guided in a specific way. So this was their like hallmark program from AWIS. In addition to like coffee chats, so then you got to meet women CEOs or whatever, like whoever signed up to be a part of AWIS. And what I was doing there was I was basically a volunteer with them. So I was part of I was part of the event planning committee. So we had like a very tight schedule of like every month we want to have one event. It could be a networking event, it could be a workshop, it could be whatever. So I was like involved in getting the budgeting, organizing the event, getting the feedback, getting funding for it. So all these different aspects, which I think are very, like they were also very fulfilling aspects for me, because I got to learn all these other aspects of how to handle such events.
So this is of course for women, but I'm sure there'll be other such organizations which cater to men as well. Also
100%. And actually we encouraged men to be mentors as well, because at the end of the day, like it's not just women that need to stand up for each other. It's also that they need champions in any gender in the workforce.
Right. So this is amazing. It has been such an amazing journey of yours, and I'm so glad that you shared it with us. I'm sure a lot of students will get a lot of inspiration from this. If we get some questions from students and feedback, I'll definitely revert to you. And if we need to connect again, I will again, of course, hopefully we can speak to you again in the future. But in the meanwhile, all the best to you, Tanvi, and thank you so much for being with us and sharing so much information. It's been
Thank you for organizing this. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Tanvi. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.